While we sleep, the guardians of the night take to the streets, having said goodbye to those they love. Each other knowing they may never say these words again, they face the evil that we run from. They dedicate their lives to those that would hate them because they wear the badge. They wear the badge not for the glory or recognition, but for the passion to help others. This is the LEO First Podcast. We'll talk to the men and women in law enforcement, those that have retired, those that keep the prisons secure, and anyone who's impacted by law enforcement. We'll peel back the curtain, and you'll get the real stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Every law enforcement officer has a story to tell. Get ready to hear from the men and women who put their lives on the line every day for their communities and their country. Welcome to the LEO First Podcast. Now, here's your host, Michael Laidler.
Hey everybody, it's Michael Laidler, your host of the LEO First Podcast. And while this episode may not come out for a few months, this is actually the first one of the year for me. It's January 2024, and I'm starting the year off great. I was in the green room before we started. I was just talking about how I haven't had any speaking engagements the entire month of December and most of January. I feel really refreshed. Trust me, when you're able to stay at home, especially when you really love your home, it's just like that mental reset that you need. And now I come into this first podcast of the year, just bringing that same mindset of renewal, refresh, excitement. Like, okay, what's the tackle? So as you guys know, the LEO First Podcast is designed to humanize the badge, just to kind of take that back scene or behind the scenes look of the people that are on the show. You guys know all our episodes are extremely conversational. I don't come up with a lot of scripted questions because the more scripted questions I come up with, the more I tend to either sound robotic, monotone, or just don't have that same level of passion that I would have if we just kind of made the questions on the fly. So as we say that, that's why I'm kind of doing a little bit of rambling on, just because the joy of having a podcast is just kind of going on, talking, let you guys know what's going on. Because like you, I'm a regular person that just has things going on in my life. And sometimes recognizing how important it is to actually take time away from traveling or speaking or just out there in society, you have to know, because sometimes you see us and you think, hey, you guys are on the road all the time, or you might be speaking here or there. Well, I do, but I also take that time to reset my mind, because I know, as a big a person that loves to push self-awareness, that I know that you have to have those moments where you just take it all back to day one and just reset your brain. So I have done that. You guys have heard about it a little bit. Now it's time to get deeper into the show. Our guest today is Mike Schentrup. He is a seasoned and retired law enforcement officer. He has been around. He formed a company that we're going to talk about, but I'm excited. He reached out to me, and ever since that time, even before that, I've been following him, his journey on training. And you guys know how much I love to have people that train law enforcement, because I do that myself on the show, because it's a never-ending thing. You know, when I started when I was 19, I was like, okay, maybe 20, 25 years, I'll get into this industry and get out. I'm actually going on 19 years this year, and I'm still going strong because I love it. And it's very refreshing to see people like Mike out there doing the same thing. So Mike, it's your time. Tell us who you are.
Yeah, Michael, thank you again. I'm super excited. I follow you on LinkedIn. The articles you read are really refreshing, and are you right? Are refreshing. So great work out there doing that stuff on your leadership first. So it's funny that you say that, because cops in general, it's like, who are you? What are you? Well, it's like we're cops first, right? We're cops first, but should we be cops first? I was just thinking about that when you talked about it. I'm going to introduce myself first as a dad, right? I'm married for almost 30 years now. I have 5 kids, only one more in the house. And probably my greatest accomplishment in life is raising 4 young men. And I have my daughter's the youngest, and that's probably been my greatest accomplishment so far. And they're all wonderful kids, succeeding in their own ways. But as a law enforcement officer, I did 25 years in Gainesville, Florida Police Department. Gainesville, I always tell people it's about 2 hours straight north of Orlando, right in the middle of the state. It's where the University of Florida is. And yes, I graduated from University of Florida, and that's where I met my wife. And this is where we settled down. I grew up in South Florida near Fort Lauderdale. That's kind of where I grew up and went to college up here. But after 25 years, I retired as a captain, lots of years in investigation. But before I left, I had started a training company about 5 years before I left, and it slowly grew. And after COVID, we went through COVID, right? And I was getting towards my 25th year. And in 2021, don't get me wrong, Gainesville, Florida is a college town. Obviously, the government is influenced by very liberal policies and stuff, and it's not an easy place to work. That's for sure. I loved my agency though, and people ask, did you get out because of the climate with law enforcement? No, I got out because 25 years was a good time pension wise, and my wife lost both her parents in 2021. One unexpectedly, one long-term disease, but the worst thing was she lost her brother to COVID early that year. And, it just makes you sit back and realize a little bit, Michael, that life's too short. I think you spoke of it a little bit, is that there's one thing in the world that Jeff Bezos can't buy. There's one thing, because that's the richest man in the world, right? He can't buy time. You can't add time to your life. You can't add years. You never know when it's all going to be done. And I don't want to sound morbid here, but I realize my wife, God bless her, makes a good living as well. We've been very blessed in our community to do well enough. I knew I could make the company grow, and I want to take that shot too. And she supported me. Plus my parents moved in with me just about that same time. So a lot of things together made me decide that, it's a good time to step away from the job. So that's me in a nutshell.
Mike, you said so many things, and I did tell you before the show started that I take a lot of notes, and a lot of people that have watched or at least listened to the podcast know that I take so many notes because I'm trying to keep up. I'm trying to remember all the things you talk about, and you hit so many things just in the opening that I'm trying to prioritize in my head what I want to ask about. But the most important thing to me outside of family, which I know is going to sound a little weird, is my own well-being. Because like you said, Jeff Bezos can't buy time, but a lot of it's our time. Like, how do we maximize that? And all the things you went through between, like you said, living in a city like Gainesville, working in a city like Gainesville, your wife going through what she had to go through with her parents or brother, and just the climate of life. It's just crazy how when you sit back and actually look at it, you're like, my life's going to end at some point. What am I doing to enjoy it? I was actually in the movie theater several days ago. There's in Regal, and I don't endorse them by any means, but they have something they call Mystery Monday. I want to say it's the first Monday of every month, at least here in Texas. And they'll give you a mystery movie for like $5. So I like doing that because you never know. And the mystery movie is usually something that doesn't come out for another 30 days. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. Like the first of the year, they actually had something called it was for $1. Same thing, a mystery movie. I didn't get a chance to see it, but they have like a movie that's $5 and it usually comes out 30 days before the official release. So I like doing that because it's fun. I mean, and it's cheap. I mean, it's a little nice date night or just a night to get away. So long story short to that point is a movie called Origin came out, and it talked about like the caste system and talked about like slavery, the Holocaust. But regardless of what the message was, as I was watching it, it popped in my head what we're talking about right now. I was like, man, I'm 38 years old now. Like in about another 50 years or so, hopefully at least 50, I'm not going to be here anymore. Right. What have I done for myself? What have I done for my family? What have I done for the world to impact it? Because I see this woman on here that the story was based on making a a forever change on how people look at certain things. And I started to think about my own impact. Like, what am I doing to kind of get there? What am I doing to help balance my life out? Or am I just watching TV all the time? Like what am I doing to get there? So kind of like you, like, you're like, you know what, after 25 years of being in Gainesville, it was like time for that change. It was time to kind of do something different. And I love the fact that you said you had a company you already started several years before that. So you had something to go to. So when you look at everything you had going on in your life, what was one of the things that you realized made the biggest difference in increasing your happiness in your own life?
You know, that's a great question, Michael, because I've always been relatively content. You know what I mean? And I think happiness is a weird word. I don't, content might be better, right? At least for me, from my perspective. I don't know about other people's perspective, but I never really sat back and said, am I happy? I've been very fortunate to have a great wife and a great partner in life. And, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of times when I was super stressed, right?
Of course.
I'm a detective. I'm working all day. You get that last minute call, but you got to pick up the kids because your wife told you today, I got to stay late. You have got to get the kids. And those things happen. Then you're worried about getting them to practice. And I coached them all for years and years and years. So we were doing, and there was definitely a lot of stress involved in that, but there was joy too. So it's always perspective. I mean, one thing I didn't realize this early in life because I didn't know who I was, but later on in life, I realized that I'm definitely a glass half full person. I'm really an optimist by nature, and that's a blessing. I mean, it just, I tend to try to see, and now the more I've gone on, I really try to say to myself, I'm like, God dang it, I got a flat tire and we're on vacation. But then I say to myself, you know what? My spare's good. I'm in a safe spot on the side of the road. Let me think about the things that, listen, and it's so easy to keep, I do it every day. You're like, oh my God, the day's not going right. This, that, and whatever. You got to step back and you're like, nobody's out to get you. This day is not out to get you. Yeah, I mean, it's a mindset. And as soon as you click and you're like, you know what, that's stupid. This day is not out to get me, right? It's not going to be one of those days. The day is what you make it, right? And I've changed. Don't get me wrong, I've changed. I'm 53 years old, so you're a baby, Michael, to
I
me,
understand.
right?
I understand.
Right.
That's why I'm trying to recognize this stuff early on. I'm trying.
Yes,
I'm trying to
you're
make people
doing a
think
great
about this
job.
early.
No, I mean, because it was probably around your age, mid 30s, when I really dived into making myself better. Whether it was my first book I read was How to Win Friends and Influence People,
Yep. Dale Carnegie.
and then Seven Habits of Highly Effective People after that. So it was getting better myself and then trying to become a better leader. And but that's probably mid 30s is when I finally decided really dived into it as much as anything else. I just thought it was kind of just like, yeah, you know what you're doing. It is what it is, right? But it's not. It's something. It's a learned trait, and you can learn to be better, and your mindset can learn. And it's an important aspect of life.
And it's funny that's when I thought about self-awareness. I was about 3 or 4 years ago in my mid 30s. I started thinking about, like, especially in law enforcement. And I think, and some of it was what was going on with George Floyd and the climate of law enforcement, COVID, like all of that did play a factor, I think, in when I started really thinking about it. Cause I was looking around saying, man, I don't work on myself as much as I should. Like, I'm not growing as much. I'm not reading as many Dale Carnegie books or Stephen Covey books, John Maxwell, name the list, James Allen, whoever you might want to say. I'm not developing myself in the way I should. Obviously, I have a good job. That's a given. I mean, anybody that has a government job of whether it's working for a municipality, whether it's working for the state, whether it's working for the federal government, you have at least a job you can keep. Put it that way. Like, you
That's
usually
true.
have to do a lot to get fired. I mean, realistically. So
no, you're right.
Half the battle for people, like it's crazy. And I'm gonna kind of go off subject a little bit. I was talking to a gentleman not too long ago, actually about a week and a half ago, and we were just talking about salaries. Like, I wasn't talking about mine, he was talking about his. And he's a guy, he's in mid to late 30s. And he was just talking about just being happy to have a job that's making about 40 to 55 grand a year. And then I thought about like what I make and some of the things I do, and just a perspective. It's refreshing to say, hey, he's just happy to have a job. Like some people just don't have a job in general. Like people are struggling to even buy a meal. And then I kind of look at my situation, how blessed that is. Kind of like you with the spare tire. It's like, okay, the tire's flat. At least I got a car.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
at least
Right.
I could be mad at having a car. Like, I could be
Right.
mad at the tire, but you know what? At the end of the day, it's just a tire. I mean, let's just look at the half full side of it. Like you said, I think that's important. So for you, um, how was it like when you started thinking about that self-development? I know you said it started to change, but is that what ultimately led you to opening up your business?
I would say no, that was there was different reasons for that. It was funny. I was a detective. I was in a major case at the time, and I went to a class, and I had just started reading. I hated reading as a kid, but for the previous 3 or 4 years, I started reading. I don't really like fiction too much, so I started reading Civil War history, and I read a bunch of books, probably like 15 or 20 books. And I went to a class. It was a written statement analysis class, and the guy pulls out a book for whatever, I don't even remember why. He pulls out a book. He's like, you want to become better talking to people, you read this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I had heard of it before. I was like, you know what? That's a small book. I can read that book. And I read that book and I'm like, wow. Instantly, I became a little bit better. It taught me 2 or 3 things right out of the box to make me a better human being. Um, and then I don't know what, I think Seven Habits was my second book, and that's the one that probably hit me harder than anything else. I mean, the guy, Stephen Covey, was way before his time on stuff like that. And that's when I realized Stephen was pretty clear in the book, like, hey, you can't be a good leader until you learn how to lead yourself, right? You got to make yourself better before you can decide, oh, I want to help other people be better. You got to be your best possible person. And it taught me about blame. One of Stephen Covey's things is I was never somebody who would stab somebody in the back to climb ahead, but I will say I was somewhat jealous of other people's success, right? As opposed to celebrating their success. If they won, I felt I lost. What a mistake. I mean, I don't know how, I mean, that competitive nature, I mean, whatever it was, but when somebody else gets promoted, I should be super happy for them and then try to figure out, okay, they got promoted. What did they do? Maybe I can emulate them. Let me go ask them a few questions about how they got promoted or why did they get this job? And yes, sometimes it's not even. Yes, sometimes it's the buddy system, no doubt about it. But, we got to celebrate. And that's the thing, I think, as much as anything else, is celebrating other people's success. The more I helped other people succeed and celebrated their success, the more I succeeded. It's kind of an inverse relationship. The more you compete against other people, I think the more restrictive you are personally and you don't succeed as well. When you celebrate other people's success, and if they ask you, how do you succeed? You tell them and you wish them the best and you share everything you have, the better you become and the more blessings you have. And I don't know if it's karma. I don't know. Maybe it's just a mindset, whatever it is. I truly believe that that was one of the big things that changed me probably in my middle to late 30s.
Where do you think that competitive nature comes? Like, do you think that it's something that we're
Mhm.
raised with, the kind of like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna crush you so you can't get what you want? Because you're right, it happens a lot. I mean, and it's still obviously it's the nature of some people, but sometimes I find myself, even though I'm extremely self-aware of what I do nowadays, still kind of getting that in me, like, gosh, I mean, I wish that was me, or dang it, how did he or she get that? Like, where do you think that comes from?
Golly, I don't know. First child syndrome, who knows? I would say that, and some people aren't like that by nature. Now, I will say that naturally, I'm not a super empathetic guy. That's one thing I've had to work on over the years too, is being more empathetic. I don't know if that's the same though, but I mean, I was hyper competitive, even as a police officer. Like, my good friend would go have a great drug arrest, chase a bad guy down, tackle him, gun in the waistband. And I'm like, man, I need to go do that now. Now I need to go do that. Right. I'm thinking, you think back in life, like, what is wrong with my brain? So Michael, I think, it's that self-actualization that, yeah, you still sometimes have those thoughts, but then you rein yourself back in and you get happy for the individual and you celebrate their success. Now, I will say to a certain extent, it's easier to celebrate other people's success when you have success, right? Because now there's really not a competition anymore. So, but it's really a mindset. And I really do think if you can change and snap yourself into a positive mindset, not just for yourself, but for other people's successes, that's part of the growth mindset. When you read I'm sorry, I can't remember the woman who wrote the book on growth mindset, but one of them is celebrate other people's successes, right? And don't be jealous of them. I think it does make a difference.
Yeah, and it was Carol Dweck in her book Mindset. Yeah. She wrote a lot about the growth mindset. Actually, in my book, I referenced it. That's why I was able to think of it right away. I read a lot, but I'm not that good to just remember everything. But yeah, she wrote about it. But you're right. It is kind of like that growth mindset. I think it's a little bit in life. I think just some of the things we see, like for me, like I know I'm not good at everything, but I'm going to try to always beat myself. Like I'm always competitive with my own skill. Like I'm always trying to figure out, okay, I did a presentation. What else could I do better in the next one? What else can I do to beat this one? If I had 5 people clap, can I get 6 people to clap next time? You know what I mean? I think a lot of it comes down to competing to myself. So even when I see that other person's success, I'm like, dang, I don't think that what can I do to get better than them? What can I do to get myself better to get to that level? That's usually
That's exactly right. Right. We can't control how good anybody else is, right? Or what success is. And then maybe they've had some luck and they've known some people. We can't control that. All we can control is how good we do every time we have an opportunity, whether it's a speaking engagement, a teaching engagement, working at your agency. That's the only thing we have absolute control of. It's our personal effort, right?
Yeah, and it is, and it's crazy. It's because you're right. It's just like I think about like especially being the speaking, especially really increasing my speaking engagement over the last couple of years. Like I'm always looking, I'm always on LinkedIn, I'm always on things like IG and stuff like that. Just kind of looking, seeing what people are doing, and thinking, okay, well they got to this conference, how do I get there? They got to this stage, how do I get there? I don't never really think, well, he shouldn't be there or she shouldn't be there. I'm thinking, how can I get there? Like, okay, they spoke. Right. Now it's my turn. Like, how do I go on? How do I get next year rolling? Because if they're there, they just spoke there today or yesterday, or they speak there tomorrow, they're already booked. I can't stop that. How do I get on the ticket next time? So I think it's good to have that competitive nature in ourselves to compete against ourselves. But when it starts getting to the point to where you want to see people go wrong or fail, I think that's where we go wrong, because we can't control all the factors that got them selected or help them accomplish whatever they needed to get to. Like we can't control that. And I think where we're at, you and I, in our lives nowadays, is very good because we don't see other people as negative experiences when they win. It's like, okay, they won. Let's boost them up. Let's try to even help them get to another win. And we just enjoy their experiences, because we know over time, just being the right person at the right time will help you achieve whatever you're trying to get to.
I think you're a perfect example, Michael. I mean, you have people on your podcast that now people have a platform to talk about themselves and their company, right? It might help you a little bit, but really doesn't help you too much. If you were hyper competitive, you would be trying to keep other people kind of in the background somewhere, right? So I applaud you for what you do, because you're giving Mike Schentrup, and I don't ever feel like anybody's in competition with me or my company. I think we're in the same space, and I think there's plenty of room for people who do a really good job. But I will say, just to change topics real quick.
Go ahead.
And currently, one of the main things, running a company, I got 20 contractors now. They work at different paces and stuff like that. Plus I have 2 employees, 2 part-time employees, one a staff assistant, one a general manager. So the company's growing, but there's a lot of stress on that, right? I mean, stress growing company and being responsible for all these things. And I said in the past that, like, if I just did my own speaking engagements and my own teaching, I'd probably make just as much money. Now, maybe not down the road, but right now. But I get so much pleasure out of meeting people who have a passion for teaching and giving them an opportunity to get out there and teach. Because, not many people have an opportunity to travel across the country and teach what they're passionate about. And just seeing them and talking to them and hearing them of their adventures and their opportunities, that does it for me as much as anything else. That seeing the growth in other people. The challenge of running a business is part of my growth journey, but for them, it's giving other people that opportunity that a lot of people don't have.
And it's interesting because a lot of people will never know how to run a business. So I know me growing up in law enforcement, you growing up in law enforcement, we're not really taught to be entrepreneurs. It's not the number one thing that's taught. And my friends that are outside law enforcement, I have to explain that to them. I'm like, just let you know, when you work for law enforcement, no matter what capacity it is, whether it's a police officer, a detective, a border patrol agent, corrections, juvenile justice, whatever it might be, we're not taught how to run a business. We are taught to work within a system that's designed for you to be out in 20 to 25 years. That's how it's designed. It's not designed for you to recreate. It's not designed for you necessarily to look for clients, so to speak, because you're going to get if you come in, at least show up to work and do the bare minimum, you're going to get a check every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Being an entrepreneur is a whole new category, literally. Like, if you don't work, you don't get paid. Like, that's just kind of how it goes. And that's the difference. And the fact, Mike, like you're saying, it's cool that you have the 20 contractors, 2 employees, because some people will never have that opportunity to even demonstrate their skills without people like you that are giving them a chance. And I know you're right. It's different. It's always amazing when I'm able to refer somebody. I know that's not the same as having an employee, but if someone says, hey, you know what? You know anybody that can speak in a couple of months in this platform? I'm like, you know what? I do. And then they go speak. That's rewarding to me, because now I gave them the opportunity to go give their message and to share their experiences. So it's just a different way.
Super rewarding. And, people call me now who are young entrepreneurs or police officers who want to do it. And I basically, Michael, will tell them everything that I've done and the hurdles that I had to overcome. I don't mind telling anybody anything. Now, if they ask for my email list of customers, I draw the line there, right? But as far as giving them, like telling them all the nuts and bolts of starting a business and, what you should ask for and remuneration early on, and you have to build a client list and get on LinkedIn tomorrow, right, and start working your tail off to build a platform there. And then you see them grow and they actually listen to you, because most people don't want to put all that work in, right? But the ones who do, and you're like, then they call you up and like, hey, I got my first speaking engagement. I'm like, I just got a call from a guy the other day who we talked probably 18 months ago. The guy wrote a book. It's a really interesting concept too. He's applying stoicism to police work. So he calls them. The book is called Street Stoic, and it's a wonderful. Steve Sweeting's a great guy, and I worked with him. And we had dinner one night, and he was just eating everything up. And I'm like, here we go again. I've told so many people the same thing, and they just don't do it. Well, he did it, right? He put his head down and he went to work. He finished his book. He got on LinkedIn. He joined another person on a podcast, and he just got his first speaking engagement a little while ago, paid speaking engagement. So, and he was calling me for advice on how to ask, how much you should get paid and stuff like that. So that, to me, I mean, that's more exciting. That made my day. I will tell you, Michael, that made my day.
And that's what it's all about. And I meant to say this earlier. You were talking about like the business stuff. When it comes to the clients out there, I will tell every person that's a speaker or even a business owner, even if you're offering the same exact product as somebody else, there's always more demand than supply. Always. There's more people looking for people that talk about leadership than there are people out there speaking about leadership. It literally is. I was in a speaking program or marketing program about 2 years ago, and one of the coaches, he does professional speaking for a living. That's his full-time job, makes like $500,000 to $1 million, much more than even I think about making. I mean, I think about it. Let me take that back. I just don't make that concept. But he was saying throughout the year in the US, there's 1,500 speaking gigs a day.
Yeah.
1,500. Because you start thinking about it, just think about the ones you know right now, Mike. Just think about those. Each one of those is going to have at least one speaker. So if you could think of, let's say, 15 conferences off top of your head, that's 15 opportunities right there. And then think about how many speakers you know. Like, there's really not that many people, like, especially entrepreneur types that go get it, that go do it. Like, there's a lot of instructors out there. There's a lot of people that speak for agencies. There's a lot of people that only speak for companies. But these conferences are also looking for actual speakers, people that take the time to build programs, whether they're an hour to 8 hours, to come to their conference. So you take that same concept and you say, okay, look at the demand. There's definitely not a supply. So why be over competitive, not wanting to share your knowledge? So Mike, that's amazing that you was able to teach him, coach him, and mentor him, that now 18 months later he has a book and he's getting paid. Like, that's cool. So so that those same kind of entrepreneurial mindset that you have now, you said you had 5 kids. Which one of them do you think are kind of going to lead in that direction as well, as far as like the business side? Like, how many have been watching you and are like, you know what, I want to be like Dad?
Well, I hope all of them eventually, right? So now I will say my oldest son, he's a software engineer. So he still has he has a full-time job, but it's remote, and he definitely dabbles in trying to build his own thing and work with a friend to build a new thing that nobody else has built before. And he always is telling me ideas. And he's my IT guy, which makes it really great for my company too.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's lucky.
Yeah, my second son, he's a head down electrician and went to college, got a 4-year degree, but wanted to be an electrician. I'm like, go for it, Bubba. Lives nearby, which all my kids live around me, which is awesome. But could he be? I hope he is. I really want him to open his own electrical contracting business down the road. My third son, believe it or not, Michael, I thought we might get to this too. He just applied for the police academy here in Gainesville.
Not surprising. Not surprising.
He is he just got out of the military, did 4 years Army infantry, got out as a sergeant. A lot of leadership capabilities for sure, but he is definitely an entrepreneurial driven mindset. So, he's like, Dad, we can do this and we can do that. It's like, well, we can't do nothing at all because you're not even a law enforcement officer and you weren't a Green Beret or something. So yes, go become a cop, get on a SWAT team, and in 3 or 4 or 5 years, maybe we can do something together. But he's always thinking and throwing ideas out there. Fourth son, no, I don't think he has any intention to be an entrepreneur. And my daughter, we'll see. She's just the sweetest thing that ever happened to me. So that's all that I care about.
Hey, I don't care what she does in her life.
Exactly.
That's my baby girl.
She could do no wrong, right?
And the other boys and even your wife, they're like, really? Like, how do you go to us 4? You're letting us have it. She comes around and you're just like a teddy bear. We don't understand.
Nope, they don't, but that's okay. They'll get over it.
They'll be fine. They may all have their own daughter at some point, and they'll completely they're like, you know what, Dad? Now we see what you saw in her. Like that we understand why you were one way with us and a different way with her. We understand. Like, it's just part of the process.
That's right. That's right.
But it is crazy because, like, my son, I only have one son. I only have one child. It's funny how we talk about, like, how I'm thinking about how, like, your third one, you said, it's kind of like mimicking you. Like, he's almost taking a very similar path with getting into law enforcement, talking about the business. Like my son, and I tell people who have children, if you don't know, your children watch everything you do. Like, even when you don't think they do, especially with technology the way it is right now, whatever you're doing in your life, they're going to find out. And they're going to find out, and you're not going to know. So when I think about my own son, like, I see him, he's like, Dad, I want to make YouTube videos. Dad, I want to now get in the stock market. Dad, I want to go speak. I mean, he's 10 years old. So I'm not saying he's doing any of that yet, but he's reading my articles. You talked about some of the things I write. Like, he actually finds those on the internet. He reads them, and he will say things to me. He was like, oh, remember when you wrote this article 3 years ago? And I'm like, which article is he talking about? And then he'll talk about it. And then he'll say, you know what? I actually wrote an article called "Do You Have the Dog Mentality?" years ago. I was kind of in network marketing a little bit, and I just started thinking about the grind of, like, just having your own business. And I wrote it, and he happened to see it about a month ago. And he was like, Dad, you think I have the dog mentality? And we talked about this for days on at a time.
That's
like
awesome, dude.
Just popping up. But going back to displaying who you are as a person, when you want to establish those strong foundations, it starts with you, because your family is going to eventually watch you, see you, be proud of you, but this is what they're watching. So everything that we're doing now, like just helping out others, that's what I want my son to get into. And he's talked about opening charities for like he was just, what was he telling me last night? He was just telling me, he said by 2026 he wants to save up $30,000 so he can put a nurse through school, because his mom's a nurse, and he says there's a shortage of nurses. So he's like, he wants to come up with 30 grand so he can give somebody so they can go to college and get their degree in
wow.
that. I'm like, where do you get these things from? At 10 years old, I was just playing with X-Men and trying to figure out how to watch Saturday morning cartoons. Like,
that's right.
But then incredible. I think about what he sees. Like he sees the giving back. I take him on conferences with me, so he knows what I'm talking about. He sees the other side of volunteering, helping people out. So he's taking that to a whole nother level.
That's awesome, dude.
So when I think about that stuff, I think about everything we have going on. So one thing I saw in your background, and I know we have not touched on it at all, you did say you were a detective, but you also, I want to say, volunteer in an organization that deals with sexual violence. So,
all right.
Yeah, I saw that. Like, are you still involved in that? How did you get into that? How do you function in that? That's something I can't do myself.
Yeah. So, my career kind of focused after getting out of patrol. It took me a while. I was in patrol on midnight shift for almost 7 years. And after going to major case, that's kind of when my career took off, because I really focused in on something I was pretty good at and loved. But I went back. It wasn't until 2015 that I was a lieutenant over all of our investigations, both whether it's major case, sexual assault, or our SVU squad, property crime. My SVU sergeant, and she actually works for me now in the company too. She says, "Hey, the Florida Council Against Sexual Violence is doing a training grant to bring trauma-informed response. And I want to put in for it." And I'm like, okay, I didn't know what that was. And sexual assault was part of our job, but I really I was really more focused on robbery, homicide. And trust me, she let me know it too. She was, I always call her my leadership challenge. So I said, okay, I'll help you do it. And we did it together, and we got the grant, and they came and brought us some training. And really, Michael, it's probably the most eye-opening training I've ever had in my career. It made me see victims of sexual assault in a completely different light. And maybe I wasn't seeing them right before. Maybe it just focused me and got me on the right side of it. But it really changed my perspective, so much so that after a few years, we implemented a trauma-informed response at our agency. We trained everybody up at our agency. After a couple of years, they invited me to come speak with them and teach with them on trauma-informed response through the Florida Council Against Sexual Violence. So I started doing that, and I still do that. I still teach for them. And I think the reason I connect with cops is because I was one. I was somebody who was skeptical a lot of ways of survivors and stuff like that. So I can teach them. I'm like, this is what I thought. This is where probably I went wrong. This is what I learned, and now this is the way I see it. So it helps them kind of walk their way through the path too. But the person in charge of one of the people at Florida Council then went to go work for End Violence Against Women International. And ultimately, they brought me on to be part of their expert cadre. So I speak at their conferences every year. I'll be there again in 2024.
Good.
It's in San Diego. And it's been very rewarding to me, because I've really changed a lot of people's perspectives after I was fortunate enough to get some of that training. Now I can go out and help other people see it from a different perspective. And the way one guy told me one time, he's like, Mike, this is the way I look at it. What if your sister was raped? How would you want her to be treated? Now it's like, what if your daughter was raped? How would you want her to be treated? Would you want her to be believed, right? Would you want her to be supported? Would you want her to be put in touch with advocacy? Would you want her to be grilled by a detective, overzealous detective, who thinks she's making up the story and has decided that instead of doing a full investigation, I'm going to shortcut the whole thing because I think she's lying and I'm just going to dig in and go after her? You know, if I can have stopped a few of those things by what I'm doing, I think that's very rewarding to me.
And for me, when I just sit back and I look at like your family situation and then talking about sexual violence, just like you said, having a daughter or a sister or a wife, you think about what if that would happen to them. And you're right, it really changes your perspective versus, like you said, maybe you're that overzealous detective that has no women in their life, or they don't have the empathetic concept to say, well, what if this happened to this woman in my life? And you're right, like, because I've never done sexual violence. I've never done a detective in that area. As a police officer, you respond to calls, you do that initial reporting and things like that, but never the in-depth like field interviews or getting really into it. But it was one thing that I always, to me, I was like, people like, well, do you believe? I said, whoa. This ain't the, I'm not in a position to believe. My position is to offer whatever I can from the role I'm in. Because as soon as I start downplaying what they're doing or saying, then it makes it even worse, especially if the person really is telling the truth. Like, nobody wants to be told that, oh, I wasn't sexually assaulted. I mean, people just don't want to hear that. And then that's the very first thing that comes out of your mouth, or the first thing that you show, you make people not want to report it. So the fact, Mike, that you're doing that, it's extremely impressive. Like I said, I saw it on your profile. I was like, you know what? I don't get many people on the show that really talk about sexual violence. So when I do see somebody on there, like I get the opportunity to bring it up and kind of address and highlight it. So for people that's been through something or know someone that's been through something, realize that whatever they've gone through, it's not you. So at least listen, try to keep your opinion to yourself. Now, if they ask you your opinion, that's a whole other story, because that's them opening the door. But if you just sometimes you need to be a soundboard sometimes from probably the worst day of their life, and probably the worst day of their life ever, because that is a very traumatic thing to go through.
Yeah, I think, and this is what I tell people. I'm like, End Violence Against Women has a campaign they call Start by Believing. And their only point is this, is that, listen, let's start with the idea that the survivor's telling us the truth. And then we'll do an investigation. Wow, what an idea. We're going to do an investigation. We're going to collect, evidence. We're going to go find surveillance. We're going to go look for text messages and phone stuff, right? We're going to do all those things. And if after we've done an investigation, we find points that show us that maybe she's not being truthful, then yes, we have to go back, right, and address those inconsistencies. The point of that Start by Believing is that, just like you do, Michael, it's like, I'm not here to judge whether this is true or not. I'm here to be a neutral arbiter of fact. I'm going to write down the account that you gave, and then, I'm going to pass it on to the detectives, and they're going to do an investigation, right? And the other thing about the neurobiology of trauma, which is the one that really hit me as much as anything else, is that when you go through a hyper traumatic event like rape, your memory is not going to be great. Your timeline is not going to be great. And we expect people to be like, when did it start? When did it end? When did this happen? I want it. And they don't think like that. They don't recall like that. And then we look at that because we're taught in deception detection. We're taught like, okay, how can she not remember that? And why is her timeline so like over here, then she jumps back over here, then she's in the middle, then she's over here? And why didn't she talk more about the rape? So my Rebecca, who I talked about when we co-teach, she does this. You'll love this, Michael. She says, all right, guys, everybody right now, look to the person to your right, make sure it's a stranger, and tell them right now your last sexual experience. Go. And everybody's like, what are you, crazy? I'm not going to talk about my last sexual experience. But we're asking a victim of rape to do that openly and without any hesitation, talk about a sexual event that, a rape, right? And then I'm thinking to myself, God, she's so smart. I'm like, why would I expect somebody to just be able to regurgitate the worst sexual event possible? So a lot of insight that we pass on. And it sounds like, Michael, you're probably one of those folks who probably did it right from the get-go, but there's a lot of us who didn't do it right from the get-go. But if you have a little bit of an open mind, they learn. And like, I wrote a article called Confessions of a Major Case Investigator, talking about the mistakes I made early on in my career in sexual assault investigations. Because I just didn't know, I just didn't know.
Yeah, and it takes time, I think, for all of us to kind of understand. And like I said, I think growing up, just seeing things I've seen, like just living in different places, just growing up, just with different experiences, it was almost natural for me to say, hey, you know what, I don't have time to judge this story. I don't want to do it because it's not my role, not my place. And if I do it, it's going to take away from whatever else is going on. So let me get the facts, pass it along, and keep it moving. I can't remember what I did to get ready this morning. So not adding a traumatic event to go with it, you're like you're saying, Mike, to just say, well, how do you know not what happened, or why are you not talking about this? Hey, that's like you said, the brain blocks things out. Your brain protects you for a reason. And sometimes those traumatic events, the little details that you think a person should know because it happened and you didn't want it to happen, your brain saying, you know what, I'm going to just hide this for a little bit when I think you're ready. It's just
because if they're not important. Just one more point, and I know let's talk about something else, but one more quick point. Think about how many, officer involved shooting, right? Mm-hmm. We have officers, obviously a pretty traumatic event, enough to where you have to kill another human being. How many cops know how many gunshots went off? How many times they pulled the trigger?
Yeah.
How many cops remember actually pulling their gun out of their holster? Almost none, because those things weren't important. Right? What's important is what's coming at you, right? Whatever that threat is. So anyway, and I say that so I can put it in a perspective that cops are like, oh yeah, that's true. Oh, now I get it. Right. So,
yeah, that's what your brain does. Yes. Yeah, that's what your brain's doing. It's designed to make you focus on exactly what you need to survive.
Exactly.
All the little details, you'll get them at some point. It might be an hour, it might be a year, but it'll come back eventually when your brain says you're ready. Your brain will tell you can't control it all, unfortunately. Right. So it's just part of the business. So to kind of jump to another thing, because as we get shorter on time, I want to make sure we talk about this. Tell us about Advanced Police Concepts. Tell us about what you're doing in that company, like what you're focusing on, what the big goal is, like what is your destiny to make it the next Jeff Bezos company. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, probably not, even though I'd like that yacht he just ordered, the 400-foot sail ship that they had to tear a bridge down for to get it out of the Netherlands. No, I don't have any. So I started in 2016 just for myself, just because you could bill a little bit differently. That's a funny thing. I just learned I could charge a little bit more to the local academies if I had a company as opposed to just them paying me their set rate. So that was my initial idea. And then I brought my buddy John Rappa on because I've watched him. He was a detective for me, and I've watched him interview for years. And I know he has the heart of a teacher, and we started teaching together a little bit. And John's Rappa, if you ever see him I'm sure you've probably seen him on LinkedIn. His stuff is outrageously good. So he was the first one to I contracted with. And then I saw all this talent at Gainesville Police Department. I'm like, that person's really good at this, and that person's really good at something else. Let me bring them in and let's start doing some classes on this. So our first classes were on investigation, report writing, death investigation, and interview and interrogation. Most of it was at police academies, and we had a few agencies. But as we've gotten bigger, now we go out. After last year, we've been in 20 states in person in 20 different states, from Colorado all the way up to Massachusetts. So in Wisconsin and the Midwest. So all over, of course, the Southeast, covered the Southeast. Online, we have an online presence. I think we've had somebody from every state and from overseas now, and some of our online courses, which COVID kind of made us go to this online thing, which has expanded our business as well. But we focus on mostly investigative stuff, whether it's interview and interrogation, cold case investigations, homicide, human trafficking. And then we have another kind of side where leadership, we do frontline leadership class called Leadership for Frontline Supervisors. That's one of the classes I teach. I kind of wrote the curriculum for it, and I have some really great instructors on that topic. And then Field Training Officer. We do a lot of work. We have a class called Advanced Field Training Officer, which is kind of the next step once you've been a field training officer, kind of that continuing education of how to get a little bit better. And that's been a very popular class. Those two classes, our leadership class and our TO class, are probably our two most popular classes.
Well, all the classes you're offering are fundamentals to law enforcement. So it's like, if you're thinking about like a business entrepreneur mindset and looking at it from that just perspective, it's like, what agency can't use you if they're not using somebody else, or they just want to try a different company? Like they definitely use all of that. Literally, they can say, you know what, we could bring in Mike and Advanced Police Concepts, and we can have him tackle 6 classes for us for this year, just to maybe change the pace a little bit, especially if they've been using the same company. Some of the bigger names I won't bring up that they've been using for 15, 20 years. Maybe we want to bring Mike in for at least a year. So they say, oh, look, we got another version of the same concept. Because I tell people all the time, leadership's been around for centuries, but everybody just has a different spin on it. That's all. It's the same thing. It's be good to your people. Really celebrate them, build them up, have a servant mindset. I mean, whatever you want to call it. I mean, literally, it's always the same thing. It's just different people teaching it. So I try to tell people, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you do have to offer something. So like what you guys are offering, it makes sense because every agency needs that. If you say, well, I'm just going to offer this to every agency in the state of Florida, at least 1 or 2 are going to say, yeah, we definitely need this because we're probably not doing it, or maybe we just want a different version of it.
Sure.
So obviously what I think a lot of people struggle with early on, especially entrepreneurs, business owners, is that first year or two. What were your biggest struggles coming out of the gate that now in 2024, you wish you'd have known in 2016?
That's a really good question. Like, if I had to go back and change something that I did, I don't know that I would, honestly, because, I was still a full-time employee. I was a lieutenant, then I got promoted to captain. That first year in 2016, I only had 2 classes, only 2 people, one in August and one in December. It wasn't until 2017 that I kind of, what I did is my New Year's resolution for January 1st, 2017 was to work 1 hour every night when I got home, at least 1 hour, work 1 hour, sending out emails, working on LinkedIn, sending out connections, developing a Facebook, sending out messages to people I might know in other areas that when I've attended a class here or there, and just reconnecting with folks. It really just comes down to effort, Michael. That's kind of how it started. And we got our first pretty good gig, which turned into another gig, which turned into another gig. Last year we had almost 100 classes. So that's like 2 a week across the country. So pretty good. We're shooting for 125 this year, and I think we'll get there. We'll probably have been in 30 states at least, probably by the end of this year, in person. So, and I'm adding instructors and stuff too. So I think it just has to grow organically, right? It just has to be more work. You have to learn things. You have to reach out to people like you or people like me and say, hey, how did you do it? And then people like me will share like, oh, listen, have you thought about this yet? Have you started your LLC? Well, why do I need that? Well, I'm telling you, it's a pretty good idea on the tax savings on the back end for the way you do this, that. And they're like, oh, well, that's okay. So let me go do that. Right. I don't think it could have been a lot different just because it took time. And the funny thing is I was probably ready to step away maybe a little bit before COVID hit, and then COVID hit, and we didn't have any classes right. And I'm like, man, thank God I didn't stop working. Right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of one of those blessings. COVID hit, and next thing you know, my buddy says, "Hey, we should do some online classes." I'm like, "Let's do it." So we started an online platform, and so that's been good for us too, right? So I think just hard work. I think just hard work, and obviously I tell everybody who's starting a business, get on LinkedIn. That's your number one goal, is to start, having a presence on a platform that actually makes sense. Facebook is great, Instagram, whatever. Who cares? Now, if you're really good and you want to be on TikTok, depending on who you're looking at, that's great. But LinkedIn, to me, you can share articles, you can comment on other people, you can have conversations. You can really build your brand there as good as any other place. So I guess that's the number one tip for me, is get on LinkedIn.
And I love what you said. Your 2017 resolution was at least an hour a day. And what people don't realize is that's a lot to do in an hour. Like, obviously you couldn't do every single one of the things you named, but doing something to work on your business consistently. And once again, where I wanted people to hear is 2016, although you started, you had 2 classes. Okay. That kind of got you going. That got the moment. Cause that's how it starts. Like unless you are just lucky or just really just luck, you're going to have very few classes your first year. I mean, you're going to have very few trainings, very few speaking gigs, because to be an entrepreneur and you're actually going on your own name, it takes some time to build up. And some of the people that say, well, this person came out the gate, I said, but maybe they were the commissioner of this agency, or maybe they were the director. But then you start looking at, I said, they've been working on their brand for 20 years. They're getting it based on that title. Now, can they translate that to a profitable business? Which I think that's what confuses people. They say, well, the chief of police of this large agency, they got to go speak on stage. But I tell them they're not getting paid any extra. Like, that's part of their job. Now, can they go into retirement mode and go speak on that same stage? It all depends. If they've been building a business, yes. But if they just say, well, I retired as a chief, next year I'm going to be speaking at IACP, that's not going to happen. That's not how that works. So the fact that you realize that you had to work on it consistently, I want people to hear that. Like, it takes time to get there. It takes going through the ups and downs. Like, what you're doing now is obviously an accumulation of what you've done 5-6 years ago. That's now coming to fruition. Like, it's not like you said, the first year you taught 2 classes. Obviously, if you were doing 75 speaking or 100 speaking gigs in the first year, that would have been something that just astronomically impressive. But a true business takes time, and it's good for people you're not just going to get there. So that's why I tell people that, they say, well, you have time left before you can retire from law enforcement. I was like, yes, but once I get into that retirement mode, I don't want to start building then, because I'm going to be behind the advanced police concept companies out there, the Michael Layler Unlimited, that's been working on their company for 15 years. And, people will pay more or decide to book you if you have a track record, or you show that, oh, I've been around since 2016. They're like, oh, okay, that's better than someone that's been around since 2023. They don't know how many clients you have. They just know you've had an established LLC, an established corporation since 2016. And I think that's what we have to try to get entrepreneurs, especially law enforcement officers, to kind of realize, like, you need to start now, even if you're thinking about something 15 years down the line.
And I find most people don't want to put the work in, unfortunately, Michael. They want to, I've had a lot of people say, hey, Mike, I want to come teach for you. Okay, I need you to do this, this, and this. Do you ever think I never see this, or this?
Yeah.
They'll send me their resume. Well, I need you to send me a lesson plan on what you might want to teach. Oh, that's going to put an effort, because I tell people, I'm like, you're going to come teach for me. Don't think you're going to become wealthy. You need to teach. If you want to teach, number one, you have to do it from a good heart of a teacher, right? And I'm going to give you the opportunities to travel and meet people that you would never have met before and stuff like that, and to build your own brand. And you may branch off at some point and do your own thing, which is okay too, right? But there's a lot of effort involved that you're not, this is not like a government job where, you're in the training division at the Gainesville Police Department, and they say, hey, we need you to build us a curriculum. So between 8 and 5 on Monday through Thursday, you write curriculum and stuff, and you get paid for it, and you're taking your lunch breaks, and you're doing your workout and everything else, right? No, you're going to be building your stuff on your own time. I'm not paying you to build a class. That's your job, right? pay you. And now listen, once you have it built, now you can go out and teach it here. You only got to build it once and then tweak it. But, government employees, that's a lot of times they're just so stuck in this idea, like, I need a job. So they just go out, and as soon as they retire, they just go get another job.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to do that, right? I had this opportunity and my wife supported me, and I'm blessed, right? Because your pension gives you a nice cushion, right? Because I can almost live off between my wife's salary and my pension. My company doesn't even need to make any money.
Mm-hmm.
It does, but it doesn't need to. But it's given me time to reinvest a lot of that money back into the company too, to try different things to build up. So it's work, Mike. I mean, Michael. I mean, think about it. You're doing this on your off time. You've spent your own money to build your studio.
Mm-hmm.
You write your articles on your off time.
Correct.
Now all those things. That's just effort you've put in that a lot of people would rather just watch Netflix. And God bless them. Or they might going to want to go work an overtime assignment. Cops have plenty of opportunity to make overtime. Normally, most agencies, right? They just work an overtime assignment, and make a little money. That's fine too. God bless you. I just didn't want to do that.
Yeah. And I used to be that person. I used to love, I'm gonna go work a detail at a club, or I'm gonna go work a detail
right.
in the library parking lot, playing on my phone or something like that, or reading a book. I mean, and that's no problem with that. However, like you said, if you want that business, it's not a, like you said, in 2017, what people have to understand is, you didn't say you were doing that an hour at work. You were doing that. You had to figure out an hour once you got home with the kids and the wife and everything else, to squeeze in an hour somewhere, which probably meant one less hour of sleep. That's probably what it really meant.
That's what it meant. Yeah.
To the minimum sleep you already had, the one less hour for that, to kind of focus that. But I tell people, most of us actually have that in our schedule. We can do it. It's just, are you going to do it? I mean, you can. You trust me. You have the time. It's just, are you willing to sacrifice that hour of Netflix to build a business?
That's what it boils down to. I mean, that hour started normally at 8:30 or 9, because I worked all day. Then we had baseball practice or a baseball game or whatever. Get home, and kids are getting ready and stuff. Then I would just kind of sit there for about an hour, just looking for people's email addresses, communicating with people that I know. Sometimes the hour I didn't really even do much. I was just there looking on LinkedIn or doing other stuff. But I focus on the idea that I had a dedicated hour every day I had to work at, to kind of get the company going. Yeah.
It's interesting as you sit down and you look at what you've had to do to get there. So as we're rounding out the show, Mike, tell us, where can people find you if they're looking to bring in advanced police concepts, or they just want to hear more about your life story?
Yeah. So if you're on LinkedIn, it's Mike Schentrup, Schentrup, Mike Schentrup. You'll find me on LinkedIn. My company is easy to find, Advanced Police Concepts. One word.com, advancedpoliceconcepts.com. We're on LinkedIn also. Our company's on LinkedIn. So DM me there. We'd love to, come work with your agency. We do a lot of host stuff too. So if a host agency wants us to come there and they give us space, we'll give you 3 free seats in the class, and we'll market it to your region. And we've really been successful doing that as well. So if you had an agency wanting to kind of bring some free training and kind of and work with us to get the word out to your community or your region about some great training, whether it's cold case, homicide, interview and interrogation, reach out to us. You can reach out to us through the website, or find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to get to know you a little bit better, or just connect with me on LinkedIn too. I love connecting with other people.
Yep. It's one of the easiest things to do. And LinkedIn's free. Mostly. Yes. I mean, unless you get like the Sales Navigator or the premium, but mostly it's free. I mean, it's free to comment, free to be on there. So it's one of, like you said, one of the better platforms to kind of expand your business. So,
well, it's professional development. It's not, every once in a while you'll see something about somebody's kids and stuff, but normally there's no politics. It's really about, listen, I've read tons of great articles, including stuff you write, Michael, on LinkedIn, right? I don't even have to subscribe to the New York Times or anything like that. A lot of people share some really good stuff there.
Yeah, extremely powerful platform. So any final words for the audience?
I want to let everybody know that I'm very grateful, Michael, to you and to your platform. I think you're doing a wonderful thing, and just have a heart of giving as much as anything else. If I can tell this to anybody, it's like the more you give, the more you shall receive. I know it sounds like karma, it sounds religious or something like that, but I think it just, when you give, it opens up you to understanding more and learning more, which then creates opportunities down the road. So great conversation today, though. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what it's about. That's what people don't get. Like the show, people think, oh, I had somebody ask me not too long ago, how much money you make off the podcast? $0. I literally make zero.
Right.
But it's about my opportunity to give and share people that I meet, people that I learn about, people that I read about on LinkedIn. Like, it's my chance to give them a platform to share their story. So anybody that's listening, maybe you might need that vote of confidence. Like, you know what? I'm struggling, or I have 5 kids. I can't do this. And then you hear like someone like you, Mike, is like, well, no, I have 5 kids. I've been married 30 years. I'm not in the divorce cycle. Like I'm not in that circle. I mean, I've been able to do it. So it's possible. Now, obviously there's other factors that go along, but maybe just people hearing that it's possible goes far. And that's the goal of the show, is like, hey, we're humanizing. We're showing that we're people, that we have to make things happen. And that's, a lot of people, when they hear the show, I ask questions as they come up, but I'm thinking about, like, how did you actually do this? Because a lot of people have the concept, but they don't really know how it's done. They're like, well, how'd you build a business? Well, 2017, I made a resolution that I'm going to spend 1 hour a day. That's how it started. So now people that are listening, you hear this, now you take an hour. If that's one of the things that you see that's going to increase your success, if you know what to do, it makes life a lot easier as you grow and build. So for everybody that's listened, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you sharing this episode. We appreciate you reaching out to Mike and just feeding into him. Obviously, he loves what he does. He could have left this industry after 25 years and been happy with his pension and his wife's salary. He could have done that, but his heart didn't stop there. The passion continued and increased to impact you guys on all those levels that he can do. So if you're a chief of police, a sheriff, or you're in any of those decision-making roles, bring Mike in. Obviously, they're trying to get to as many countries as they can over the next 5 to 10 years, and states, and that could be one of the states that they bring this training to. So everybody, thank you for your time. Hope you enjoy the show. If you need anything, reach out. If not, be safe. Y'all have a great day.
You've been listening to the LEO First Podcast. Michael has been in law enforcement since 2005. He's worked for 3 law enforcement agencies in 3 different states. He's a professional speaker who travels the country teaching about leadership development and self-awareness. And he's the author of a book called Greatness Beyond the Badge: The 3 Key Principles for Self-Awareness. It's Michael's passion to bring law enforcement members' stories to the front, so you get the real and raw take. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with Michael on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Michael Laidler, on Twitter at Michael A. Laidler, on Facebook at Michael Laidler Leadership. Send an email to michael@michaelalaidler.com and hit the website at michaelalaidler.com. See you next time on the LEO First Podcast.
Like that, I'm going to be leaving a note on a vehicle advising him to remove it.